Looking back at Dune Prophecy Season 1, for me personally, it was a mixed bag. And most of the chatter I've seen online among normies that I spoke to about the show either checked out very early on in the season or didn't bother watching it at all. As a Dune fan, there was enough there to keep me interested, to see how things would turn out. But there were definitely lots of issues that I had with it. I was honestly quite surprised to see that it had gotten renewed for a second season. But that being said, I'm glad to hear it because I think the writers now have a chance to refocus, cut out the fat of what didn't work, and build on the few good parts that were established in Season 1. But in examining the reason for my mixed feelings on the show, I can say there are things that I genuinely enjoy and things that I see immense potential in. And clearly, given this high budget, visually, it's stunning. And I really appreciate the details too of the costumes and prop department. A lot of the sets felt lived in and felt authentic. There were performances, and maybe like the main storyline was the most interesting. But unfortunately, it was weighed down by a lot of things that I didn't like. So now that we've seen the whole season, I really feel like it was largely set up. And it really feels uneven how it was paced and how it was written. It's so frustrating because I see a great show in there, but I also see like the CW-esque show that really threw off the tone and really weighed it down as far as the pacing. Lots of things that have potential and elements in isolation that I really did like. And again, visually, I have no complaints. But yeah, it's really watered down by things that I don't like, that seemed underdeveloped, underwritten, that aren't really paced very well and really don't fit well together. It's more complicated because I'm also coming at it from the perspective of a Dune fan, but I also have to think about it as a general science fiction television viewer. And also considering how normies would view this, what their opinions would be, because their opinions are just as valid as mine, as the viewer. And ultimately, Dune fans are just like everyone else. They appreciate well-crafted, well-written sci-fi, a well-written story. So as a Dune fan, there are several elements that I found really intriguing and that I really latched onto that were fun to theorize about and speculate over. And so made a few videos about that. So the storyline surrounding Desmond Hart sparked my imagination when it came to who is he? What are the nature of his powers? And the things that he was saying very much echo the sentiments of the God Emperor and the themes surrounding that of the Golden Path. So that was very fascinating to see those themes, even if they were hinted at, as well as seeing other memory. Through the agony ritual, we could see these ego memories visualized. And that whole sequence was very interesting. I thought that was so cool to see depicted, seeing these different ancestors rise and then turn very chaotic and very possessive, and then also alluding to the threat of possession. Again, a major element of Frank Herbert's saga. So I very much enjoyed that, seeing that visual depiction. I thought it was very well acted, and there were several performances that were really strong, with ones like the Emperor, played by Mark Strong, and Desmond Hart's mysterious character, played by Travis Fimmel. And then you have the older Valia and Tula Harkonnen sisters. They had charisma, presence. Taboo, the actress who plays Sister Francesca, she was great. I wished she was introduced sooner because she really incorporated or alluded to themes that are from the saga itself. So when she was introduced, well, she's a concubine to the Emperor, and the way she was with him, we touched on imprinting, and the way her story played out very much echoed Lady Fenring, and almost like a mix between Lady Fenring and Lady Jessica, because you really started to see that she did genuinely care about the Emperor. Great actress, great performance, and again, I feel underutilized. She should have been introduced sooner, because as soon as she entered the room, she definitely had the charisma and presence, and it made me think about the scene with Lady Jessica at the banquet sequence in the book, where Duke Leto is just looking at Lady Jessica and how she commands the room, basically. Her presence and her beauty is so striking, but also her political savvy is just on display. That's what I did appreciate for the moments that made me think of Frank Herbert's saga and the moments that I love in it. And I wish there was more. Obviously, I think the writing was most strong with that. But when she had the scene with her son, Constantine, that was the one time I actually liked Constantine's character, because before that, he honestly just seemed like the writers were trying to find something for him to do. It was very much CW-ish, melodrama, that kind of tone. And it really just threw off everything of the deeper storylines going on with Desmond Hart. That's what I'm saying with the tone. We had one scene that was philosophical and covering political intrigue, like when you have Desmond Hart discussing the politics, this arranged marriage he was forced into at the beginning with the Emperor. So they're having this deep discussion, and he's talking about, do you believe in forces that extend beyond man and machine? And the writing in that scene was really good. And then the next scene, we go to this nightclub, this generic looking nightclub that doesn't feel Dune, and they're just doing like party drugs, and it feels like we're on a different show. Any storyline having to do with the nightclub and all the characters involved in that, which is the rebel plot that they were writing, was so weak and underdeveloped. And when we went back and forth between the storyline that was most intriguing to then this rebel plot line that was very weak and very CW, again, it's just completely uneven. Just thinking about it from the perspective of a science fiction viewer, it was all over the place, and at times was a slog to watch. And I just couldn't help but think that a normal viewer just wouldn't connect with this. It wasn't fun. I didn't feel immersed. So I was trying to think about it from their perspective too as I was watching this. Possibly the biggest sin is that it is boring in a lot of places. The pace is very slow and very uneven in terms of the writing. From scene to scene, just felt very mixed in the quality of writing there. There are good things in here. I see immense potential. I see a great show in this. And that's actually what's possibly most frustrating, is that I could see what it can become. We are getting a season 2, so we'll see how it proceeds. I think they only revealed this like a month before the show premiered, when the showrunner Alison Shapker confirmed that they were doing a past storyline, a present storyline, and incorporating, I guess, this prophecy, the visions of the future. I was worried because I knew we only had 6 episodes, and having a show with lots of flashbacks, it did seem like that was going to be a challenge. That can be a challenge and has proven not to be a good formula. It has to be executed very well for that to work, for you to have a past storyline, present storyline, and for it to still proceed in a organic way, in a way that's not jarring either to the viewer. So episode 3, that is the past storyline. For the majority, it was in the past and setting up the characters of Valia and Tula and their background. And I can appreciate we're setting up these characters, except you should have done that from the beginning. If we're only in episode 3 and you're just now giving the audience background and motivations for 2 of the main leads, that should have been the first thing you should have done. And that's kind of the other sin that I think the show commits, is that it presumes too much of the viewer. It presumes that you maybe have somewhat of a knowledge of the expanded Dune books so that you would already care about Valia and Tula. So in episode 1, we're just thrown into a quick montage of the Butlerian Jihad, the Machine Crusade, and introduced to Valia. And she's at a Reverend Mother's bedside, and the Reverend Mother's giving the prophecy that would lead to their destruction. We're kind of just thrown in there. And at a moment after that, after the Reverend Mother Anarol dies, there's this drama then that takes place between Valia Harkonnen and Dorothea, Sister Dorothea, and they both have very drastically different ideologies. And I feel like it's a moment that they thought would have a very impactful connection, I guess, to the audience. They completely disagree with how to move forward with the sisterhood. And at one point, this climactic thing happens where Valia uses the voice on Dorothea. And I guess the first time she's done it in this setting. And I feel like we should have just felt something in that moment. I felt like on paper, maybe the writers thought that the viewers would be in awe of what happened, but it honestly just felt flat and underwhelming. And there were a lot of moments that felt like that. That felt like the writers conceived this moment, this revelation, this surprise, this climactic moment, building it up in their minds as something more than what they were able to execute. So it kind of feels flat and underwhelming to the viewer itself. So when the moment Desmond Hart resists the voice, for example, that's another thing. I mean, it's intriguing and definitely could have led to some more intriguing storylines moving forward from that scene. But it kind of did feel underwhelming because the next moment, I think it ends right there. That episode ends, which is episode 2. We have Desmond Hart confronting Valia Harkonnen, and he's about to throw her out of the palace. So she's losing power. So she uses a voice on him, and he resists it. I can tell they thought that moment would have been really epic, and it's intriguing, definitely. but it did feel a bit underwhelming, especially when episode 3, we completely cut away from that. We completely cut away from the tension and drama from that moment to go to a prequel episode. So that's what I was saying before, that if you're going to do this past storyline, and if you're going to devote episode 3 to introducing your characters, making the viewer really care about Valia and Tula, you should have done that from the beginning. You should have made us care about these characters from the start. And it feels like they fumbled episode 1 in that regard, because I really didn't feel much of anything towards those characters. It wasn't until the story started to get going and the connection between Desmond Hart and really ramping up his efforts to destroy them, to destroy the Sisterhood, then their stories became interesting to me. And as far as another revelation that kind of fell flat was the revelation that Sister Theodosia is a face dancer, a proto-face dancer. The way they introduced that, again, felt underwhelming because she just became the image, she assumed the image of Valia's dead brother Griffin. And it came across as just using her abilities for a therapy session for Valia. If that's the way you were going to introduce face dancers, I feel like it should have been more epic. It should have been a way more dramatic moment than her just coming to terms with her brother's death, having closure. Again, a moment that just felt I think they thought this is going to be way more impactful to the audience, but the way they handled it and the way they executed it didn't feel that way. Overall, I think there are definitely elements that I will take away from the series and continue to appreciate, like the shot of the highliner coming out of fold space, the visualization of other memory and possession, and a few of the more standout, enjoyable performances. And as I've said so many times before, I think the production chaos is likely to blame for why the show feels so scattered. And I suspect that Warner Brothers knows that, and this is why they went ahead and greenlit season 2, despite the show not performing particularly well in the ratings. So if the development of season 2 goes smoother, I'll remain curious to see if these writers can come up with a more focused and hopefully more linear and cohesive story in season 2. But I'm curious to know what you thought about Dune Prophecy. Did you finish watching season 1? Was there anything that stood out to you that you either loved or hated about the show? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy news and lore. And if you're looking for other ways to show your appreciation, you can check out my Patreon page, where members get access to exclusive content and perks. Thank you all so much for your support. And as always, have a very nerdy day.